I'm standing here in front of the grave of former Croatian dictator Ante Pavelić, who ruled over the independent state of Croatia, a Nazi puppet state during the Second World War. And I'm in Madrid. What is the grave of Ante Pavelić doing here in Madrid? How did Ante Pavelić escape justice? And what did the Vatican have to do with all this is what you will learn today. On April 6, 1941, Yugoslavia was invaded by the Axis powers. When the German-led invasion started, the Yugoslav army fell apart quickly, and within 12 days, the Axis had conquered the South Slav kingdom. An armistice was signed on April 17th. When Yugoslavia was overrun by the Axis powers, it was partitioned by them. And the biggest part became the so-called NDH, the independent state of Croatia, led by Ante Pavelić and his Ustaše movement. During those 4 years, the Ustaše party that ruled the NDH conducted a savage policy aimed at fashioning a largely homogeneous state out of a heterogeneous population. The method which was employed involved a combination of extermination and expulsion of Serbs, Jews, Roma and others deemed undesirable by the ruling party. And then it was May 1945. Hitler was dead. The German armies were in full retreat in order to be captured by the Western Allies rather than the communist forces. In Yugoslavia, the partisans of Josip Broz Tito had gained the upper hand after years of resistance. Ante Pavelić, the Ustaše leader, was willing to defend Zagreb, the Croatian capital, with or without German help. Pavelić's family had already left Croatia for Germany at the end of 1944. Do notice that, in 1944 it was believed that the Allies would strike into the Balkans from Italy. Churchill favored this plan, but this plan was never carried out. By May 1945, Pavelić pleaded with the Western Allies, Britain and the US, and asked them to fully occupy Croatia so his country would not be taken over by the communist-oriented partisans that by now were officially called the Yugoslav National Liberation Army and partisan detachments. Pavelić may have believed that his state could survive the Second World War and continue to exist. He was willing to hand over power to a local archbishop who refused and suggested Vlatko Maček, the leader of the Croatian Peasant Party, the HSS, but Maček had already made his way out of Zagreb. The Ustaše leaders discussed what to do. Would they lay down their arms honorably and surrender to the Western Allies? Or would they continue to conduct a guerrilla warfare until there would be a split between the Allies? Meanwhile, large columns of Germans, Croatians and others who did not want to fall in the hands of the communist partisans were making their way to the British and American lines. On May 6th, German commander Alexander Löhr spoke with Pavelić and said that Germany was prepared to surrender. Now, from this moment there are different accounts on what Pavelić exactly did. What is sure is that he did not want to fight till the death and was planning his way out. And he succeeded in doing this. After the loss of Zagreb, large groups of Domobrans troops and Ustaše, as well as Cossacks and Slovenes, went into Austria to surrender to the Western Allies. And at Bleiburg they were disarmed and handed over to the communist forces. I read that 116,000 NDH personnel fell in the hands of the partisans, and around 60,000 of them were then executed, which is more than half. The last fighting between NDH and partisan forces took place at Odzak on the 25th of May 1945. And did you know that the Vatican assisted Ante Pavelić with escaping? Why? The Vatican too did not fail to offer its support to escaping Nazis, fascists, Ustaše and former collaborators. The highest representatives of the Catholic Church believed the communist bloc would soon wage war against the capitalist bloc to take control of the world, safeguarding Western civilization and Christian values, and taking back the Eastern countries fallen under Bolshevik rule would require a tremendous war effort. In this perspective, all those prepared to fight against communism, whatever their past, were assets that needed to be preserved. How did Pavelić manage to escape? After a long march through the Austrian mountains. Near the end of May 1945, he stayed in Leingreit near Kiersdorf in Tyrol, where he was reunited with his wife, daughters and servants. This was in the US occupation zone, yet he still had to be careful because Tito's secret agents were on the lookout for Ustaše commanders. Near the end of June, he left his hideout. He did not even tell his wife where he was going. It is said he remained in Austria for over a year, leading a monastic life. He let his beard grow, wore glasses, and donned a tunic or a sackcloth habit, moving from one hideout to the other. In the fall of 1946, Pavelić arrived in Italy. The US Secret Service estimated that the Ustaše treasure transferred to Rome and held in the Vatican for safekeeping amounted to 200 million Swiss francs, equal to 47 million US dollars. A CIA report read as follows. Accompanied by only an aide, Pavelić arrived disguised as a priest, traveling under the name Don Pedro Gónzalez with a Spanish passport. From early 1946 to late 1947, the Ustašes in the Vatican harbored Ante Pavelić as well as other Ustaše leaders, and the support of the Croat underground in the Vatican was critical for Pavelić's escape from Europe to Argentina. By the end of that period, most of the Ustaše had been resettled, mainly in Argentina, and were beginning to establish themselves. First, Pavelić was a guest in a crowded house in an extraterritorial part of the Vatican. Subsequently, he moved to Castel Gandolfo, where he rented a room in the city center, in the apartment of a retired high police official, who, despite having served as a police escort, did not recognize him. At some point, the Western allies, they stopped looking for him. By now, between 1946-47, the relations between post-war Yugoslavia and the Western Allies had deteriorated severely, and many Croatians now worked for the Americans because of their anti-communist sentiments. It was now the Cold War, and the United States wanted to use all the people in their fight against communism. If Pavelić had been arrested, their willingness to work with the United States could have been compromised. And between 1947 and 1948, most Ustaše commanders who had made their way to Italy or Austria made their way to Buenos Aires in Argentina. Argentina was more than just a safe haven. It was an allied country, much in the same way that fascist Italy had been in the 1930s. The Ustašes would have been able to reorganize their forces in Argentina, resume the struggle against communism, and ultimately take back Croatia, Pavelić believed. Argentina harbored a Croatian community that had lived in the country for decades. The Ustaše movement was well rooted here, and Pavelić had reasons to leave Italy because in September 1948, articles appeared in Italian newspapers about his stay in the country. One title read, "Pavelić, the Croatian Duce, lives in Italy undisturbed." Pavelić reached Genoa in secret, and from there he embarked on a ship that left for Argentina. For this, he was assisted by Monsignor Krunoslav Dragonović. He was a Bosnian Croat Catholic priest associated with the ratlines, which aided the escape of Ustaše war criminals from Europe after World War II, and he helped Pavelić getting to Argentina. The Poglavnik arrived in Buenos Aires on November 6, 1948. His arrival did not go unnoticed though, as employees of the Yugoslav embassy in Buenos Aires took photos of him strolling through the streets of Buenos Aires. Near the end of 1949, Pavelić announced the establishment of the Hrvatska Zdravotvorna Stranka, a party for a creation of Croatian state against the Yugoslav chaos, for Croatia's freedom and independence, as he believed that the days of a Yugoslavia under Tito were numbered. He also created a Croatian government in exile from Montevideo, Uruguay, on the 10th of April 1951, the date marking the 10th anniversary of the founding of the independent state of Croatia. He had moved to Uruguay as the Yugoslav government put pressure on Argentina to extradite him. Early 1952, however, he resumed his activities in Argentina, and the Yugoslav requests for extradition of him were ignored by the Argentine authorities. Interesting to know is that Pavelić found common cause with former Serbian or Yugoslav politician Milan Stojadinović, who had led the Yugoslav government between 1935 and 1939, bringing it closer to fascist Italy and Nazi Germany. They came up with the slogan Independent Serbia and Independent Croatia. But soon political rifts within the Ustaše community emerged. And by the 1950s, the Ustaše landscape had splintered into diverse and often conflicting fragments. Argentine President Juan Perón was overthrown in 1955. Some of the Ustaše, most compromised by association with the Perón regime, fled Argentina. The Argentine police searched Pavelić's house and he himself was apprehended and questioned. He was soon released. Outcry in the Argentine media about the presence of Ustaše and Nazi war criminals in Argentina emerged. On the evening on April 10th, 1957, Pavelić walked on the streets of Buenos Aires. He was approached by a man who drew his pistol and fired several shots. Pavelić was injured. One of the 2 bullets was lodged in his spine and the injury might have damaged his motor system. Who was the assassin? Well, it was a Serbian migrant that lived in Argentina, Blagoje Jovović. As Pavelić recovered, the government of Argentina reached an agreement with Yugoslavia to extradite Pavelić. While still being wounded and recovering, Pavelić managed to escape along with his personal physician and 2 collaborators, and they stayed in hiding for 50 days. He then moved to Argentine Patagonia and later settled in Chile, where they remained in the Chilean capital for 4 months, the guest of a fellow Croatian patriot. He failed to recover, however, and finally decided to move to Spain for better healthcare and a safe haven. On the 27th of November 1957, upon receiving permission to do so, Pavelić set out for the Spanish capital. There he lived with his family in Madrid. At the end of October 1959, his health started to decline. He visited a German hospital and his doctor was actually the personal doctor who held Marshal Göring. In November he underwent surgery. It was successful, but later paralysis set in. Unable to write, Pavelić dictated his political testament in which he appointed Stjepan Heffer as his political heir and successor at the head of the movement. Pavelić passed away on the 28th of December 1959. Pope John's blessing arrived a few hours before his passing. With the Cold War in full swing, the Poklavnik and the Ustaše were also rehabilitated in the name of anti-communism. If you want to learn more about Argentina during World War II, click here and click here for my video about Croatia under Ante Pavelić. Thanks for watching. I see you later.